As I sat behind the wheel, the letter shook in my hands under the familiar weight of my mother-in-law's criticism. I discovered it in my wallet that morning when I was late. And it was lying on my shoulders from the passenger seat. The father-in-law's unique handwriting marks the envelope with a simple message for Willow to open after watching the road. Darling, my thoughts were interrupted by Sam's voice. I'm Willow, and we wouldn't want to get stuck in a ditch before arriving at the estate. I've been the family's disappointment for the last 5 years, the girl who took Philip's priceless heir away from them. Samra believes that she is destined to marry someone more suitable. Samara. The roads are completely clear, I said, maintaining a steady tone even though we wanted to go back in time. The 2-hour drive to the family estate felt endless, and we were only changed her fashionable scarf halfway there, which I had discovered indicated another criticism was on the way. But I guess you're accustomed to these country routes, as you're aware. Philip had the board meeting, therefore it would have been more suitable for him to drive me. He'll meet us there. The letter seared in my hand as I tightened my grasp on the steering wheel. My wedding ring catching the morning light, I wanted to place the letter in my pocket. But I refrained from doing so while she was observing Harren, my father-in-law, who had always stood out. He had truly recognized me beyond my public persona and small-town roots. The schooling that, in Samira's opinion, made me such an inappropriate fit did. When Sam inquired, Harren, have you ever mentioned anything? Her voice took on an unusually strong will. I didn't lose sight of the road, but my heart. She laughed at that same practice tone that usually made him skip. So why would he? Oh, sweetheart. I was just having a discussion when I felt like I was being made fun of. I assisted in taking care of him throughout the last several months he was ill. Even though he did spend an extraordinary lot of time with you. The remarks sounded harsher than intended. Noel was busy with the London office, while I was responsible for managing the charitable foundation. She took a moment to look at her manicured nails. Nevertheless, it raises questions regarding the factors that influence the estate's magnificent gates, came into view. And I experienced the recognizable constriction in my chest, despite Philip insisting that I would come to like it. As I arrived at the home and saw Noel's Mercedes parked in the driveway, my sister-in-law was standing on the stairs of the circular drive, seemingly having a heated discussion with Leon. Groaned as the family lawyer finally arrived, gathered her things, and attempted to park. I waited until she had finished sweeping because, sweetheart, the gardeners get really unhappy when someone messes up their priceless flower beds. My fingers reached for the note in my pocket as soon as I got out of the car. But before I could take a breath, I was startled when I heard Reagan, the longtime family friend, rap on my window. Mrs. Martin, who had always been friendly to me, his aged face had an expression I couldn't quite read. Could I say something? Naturally. Reagan, I strolled outside into the clear morning air before you entered. Is everything okay? He looked toward the home and then back at me. Aside from that, Harland left you something else. He placed a tiny key in my palm and opened the study safe behind the Monet. He wanted you to see whatever you discover there before. Reagan read it. But I don't know that you have this, child, and whatever you do, don't tell Sam about it. As he left, he gave me a light shoulder squeeze, saying, you'll need it soon enough, with the key burning in my hand like a burdensome secret. I stood frozen through the windows of the mansion. I could see people moving and congregating for what everyone thought would be a straightforward reading of a conventional will. But in Reagan's perspective, the letter and the weight of that key. Still, I took a deep breath and headed toward the home, knowing that the unopened item in my pocket would make today anything but straightforward. I had no idea how much the study felt smaller, even though I knew that whatever was inside would change everything, than I recalled. Packed with relatives who appeared to be trying their hardest not to stare at me directly. Escaped for a short time before the reading using the key Reagan provided me. But the safe was empty but for Leon's voice breaking through the single note. Waiting. Should we begin? He stood behind Harland's enormous oak desk, whispering chats and appearing to be the ideal family lawyer in his suit, and swept past me to take the leather seat closest to the desk, giving me a liberating glance. Philip held my hand as we said, hell, some of us have real business to return to. Sat down on the vintage love seat, and my husband appeared worn out from the board meeting, which was obviously wearing on Samara. Before we continued, she had, of course, placed herself in the Harland chair, a move that everyone in the room noticed. Leon started to fix his glasses. The room's temperature appeared to decrease by 10 degrees, and Sam's immaculate grin wavered as she questioned, her voice. Leon. 2 weeks prior to Harland's death, when with ease made precisely extracted a substantial packet from his briefcase, which was duly observed and notarized. I promise you to proceed, then. For the 100th time, Leon cleared his throat and said, "My dear wife Samra, I'm leaving." As Noel snapped while checking her phone, I tried to concentrate. But the words started to jumble as Leon described our London home and an annual allowance of examine the typical bequest art collections. Homes, trust funds, and all the relics of ancient money that are distributed precisely as everyone had anticipated. Until Leon eventually stopped looking. I briefly relinquished my controlling stake in Grant Industries to spend time with my daughter-in-law Willow. The silence that followed my death was terrible. Sam's voice trembled with barely controlled anger. "So there must be some error. I can promise you that Leon did not produce another paper. Mr. Grant was really particular about this clause." Noel had turned pale. She was unable to. Reagan stood there listening to the gentle voice that came from the doorway while I told her the first thing about managing a business in some ways. "I'm both happy and sorry that Harlan asked me to. Throughout the last 2 years I looked to Philip. But his countenance was inscrutable since you were all too preoccupied to notice that his hand had slackened in mine." Sam sprang up so fast that her chair scraped the hardwood floor. "Which is ridiculous, Mother. Philip's manipulation of him when he was ill and defenseless was sufficient." Dad was firm but quiet. "And he knew precisely what he was doing. Didn't he? Did you know about this? Philip, were you aware of this small coup when I discovered my voice?" I chuckled. But it sounded hollow last time. I had no idea what was going on. "So please spare us." Sam's naive act, his eyes were icy. "You had been preparing this all along, hadn't you? Were you trying to win his favor while we were everyone overseeing the actual company? The one that has been losing money under your direction?" Stepped in completely. Harlan entered the room where Harlan had witnessed your near collapse due to your self-centered endeavors and poor management. Sam began to speak, but Leon interrupted her and brought another piece of paper. "If anyone contested this decision." The threat hovered like a letter in the air. Sam slid back, clearly not wanting to read whatever was in the letter. Noel stood gathering herself, her lips squeezed into a tiny line in her chair. "I guess congrats are due. Dear sister-in-law, please try the designer bag. Not wanting to ruin our family's legacy too soon." I caught a glimpse of her stalking out with Samara just behind her. The sight of them exchanging glances chilled me. Philip murmured something about needing air and departed as well. "Let me be alone with Leon and Reagan. You have some paperwork to sign," Leon stated softly. Reagan stepped closer and said in a low voice, "You'll need to watch your back now. As there was an urgent board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning, they won't take this lightly." "Little bird." I nodded and felt for the empty safe note in my pocket. Regardless of what Harold had in store or the impending storm, I sensed that this was just the beginning. "I'm ready," I said, straightening as I sat in Harlan's old house. The memory struck me, and my spine told me what I needed to sign 2 years ago. On a soggy Tuesday afternoon in my now official workplace, everything had started to shift. As I handed him his afternoon tea, Harlan, the small bird, screamed out, "Tell me what you see when you sit in the identical leather chair that I currently use to gaze out over the estate's gardens." I was hesitant to put down the tea tray after seeing everything. After laughing, he heard a warm sound different from his wife's. Something lovely that was crumbling slightly. A knock on my office door drew me back to the practice. "You see what they don't want to see." Reagan arrived at the London office with a stack of paperwork that he had discovered in Harlan's personal safe. I put them on the desk and said, "You should carefully read them." I opened the first file, and my breathtaking 3-year financial records demonstrate a methodical fund. Sam, even though I already knew the answer, I asked about transfers to offshore accounts. Reagan nodded. "And Harlan learned that they had been embezzling funds through the charity foundation for years. Why didn't he stop them 6 months before he died?" He needed clear proof. Reagan took a seat across from me and began instructing after gathering evidence that would stand up in court. "He knew they wouldn't believe the door busted because he told you about the business through me." Philip barged in, saying, "Are you ever going to tell me what I stood for?" Shocked by his outrage about the private lessons he had with Ra about Dad preparing you to inherit his. My voice trembled a little. "I'm your spouse, Willow, and we should have mutual trust," I added quietly. "I'm not sure what the lessons are for." And Harlan just said everyone should be aware of the family company. I believed he was attempting to help me blend in with Reagan. "Philip, you have repeatedly stated that your father knew you had no interest in managing the business." Philip rubbed his hair in irritation at his mother's threat to challenge the will. "But that wasn't the point. Noel has already scheduled an urgent board meeting for tomorrow morning, and they will attempt to eject you. So I chose let them test one of the files. Willow, but don't really let them." I gave him the in addition to the firm. "Your father left me the truth in the file." When Philip read, "This can't be right. Mother would never." His face turned pale. Reagan moved to the foundation's window. "With your sister's assistance." A gentle knock halted us, and Leon came in, searching. The books are a tangle of creative accounting. And they have stolen millions. Guys. We have an issue. The bank's private vault has been emptied. What Reagan whirled around as Leon adjusted his glasses. And Sam gained entrance this morning, Reagan mumbled anxiously. Whatever was in there. The original documents. My heart sunk as I realized that Harlan had left the originals there. But then I recalled the empty safe in Harlan's message of patience regardless of whether I instructed the small bird to stand up straighter. He must have anticipated this outcome. If we examine these copies closely enough, I'm willing to bet that there's a substantial paper trail. Philip was still looking at Reagan. I can't believe they would do this based on the financial facts. Grimly stated that your father did. Which is why he ensured Willow would be able to fix it. There was another knock, and this time without waiting for a response. And she froze upon seeing that we were all assembled there having a little family gathering without her mother and me simply evaluating. This sweetheart's smile stopped short of her eyes. I responded with some intriguing documents while closely observing her regarding the foundation's financial situation with a calm expression on her face. She informed me that the board meeting had been rescheduled, covering swiftly tonight at 8. Please don't be late, sister-in-law. Missing your first would appear regrettable. Philip turned to me after our meeting as majority shareholders, asking, what are you going to do? I glanced. I had to look at the desk's cluttered files and then at Reagan and Leon Harlan. Who gifted me the weapons have the courage to use them. I'll carry out your father's wishes exactly. I promised to save this business. Even the sun was lowering outside the office windows, forming long shadows. So if it takes removing your mother and sister, then do it in a few hours. I would confront the board and my family with the shadows across the room. The truth is that I wouldn't fail Harold, who trusted me with his legacy, as I took my seat at the head of the table. The boardroom took on the atmosphere of a gladiatorial arena, with 12 pairs of eyes scrutinizing my every move. The majority of them were antagonistic. But Samara and Noel sat side by side on the right, both sporting the same. Faintly before we started, Samara's voice broke the tension, and I moved to talk about the legitimacy of the most recent leadership transitions has been confirmed. Despite Leon's repeated interruptions from his corner, Noel added. I opened my laptop as she tapped her manicured nails against the shiny table, raising questions about her competency. Speaking of competency, let's talk about the foundation's financial reports. After attaching it to the projector, Samara snapped that it wasn't on the agenda. So I opened the first spreadsheet. As a controlling stockholder, I'm adding it. The room fell silent as the screen filled with figures and numerous red flags appeared. I watched Sam's expression as I clicked through each incriminating slide of the strange transactions and inaccurate bookkeeping, becoming more and more pale. These records aren't comprehensive, Noel said, but her voice. Reagan really paused a little before speaking up from the doorway. Creating multiple boards. The forensic accountants have just completed the preliminary evaluation of Samara's chair. And members jump. They're very complete, Mother Phillips quietly said. Sit down. Signaling the end of the meeting, I clicked to the next slide. And to everyone's amazement, he hadn't spoken since we had entered the room. Approximately $23 million has been taken out of the company's coffers during the last 3 years' revenues from the nonprofit foundation, which were subsequently transferred through other shell corporations until coming to an end. You can't verify any of this, Noel. Up in private accounts in the Cayman Islands. Reagan threw a heavy folder onto the table that Harlan was maintaining and whispered, actually, we can, with careful documentation. He simply waited to take action until he had everything set up. One of the board members, an old man named Harold, cleared his throat. Mrs. Martin, are you implying embezzlement? I responded without making any suggestions and met some people's glares by expressing the facts. Sam remarked, you wouldn't dare turn over these facts to the authorities unless certain conditions are met. The company's reputation would be ruined if we handled this internally. So I stood and put my hands on both of you. Will resign from all roles within the foundation and the firm with immediate effect. You will sign over your remaining shares to the business treasury and return the stolen money, plus interest. Considering the venomous tone in Noel's voice, you'll put us in jail. Your own family? You've never thought of me as family. And sure, that's just what I'll do. Philip, I chuckled, but it wasn't funny. Stood. I supported every step that was suggested. And before anyone protested, I reminded you that we have the votes between Willow's majority stake and my shares. Harold spoke again, and the board members shuffled uneasily. Maybe we should take a moment to think about nothing to think about. I cut the documents and signed them right away. Or I called the FBI. Samara's face twisted in anger. You cunning little cautious mother. Philip cut me off. Recall who is in possession of all the cards. Now, Lion came over with the paperwork, and for a while, Nobody moved. Sam lunged for the pen, his hands trembling with fear or rage. And Noel did the same. Tears of embarrassment flowing down his face. Reagan stroked my shoulder when the signs were confirmed. And her face revealed something else we discovered when there was proof that Harlan's medication had been tampered with in his last weeks. The room became silent. Which is untrue. Sam breathing. But her face had turned ashy. Reagan said the police had already been informed and would like to talk to you. Not business security. But both of you security guys showed up in the doorway. You arranged for Noel to stand as one of the actual police officers. I approached her and quietly said, "You planned this entire thing. Did your father know who you two were?" This was his parting present to the business and to me, shielding me from the Samra. He went back one final time since they were led away, posing serious threats to his legacy. I truly gathered my papers over Willow, cognizant of the stunned board members observing. Leon, kindly share the proposals for restructuring that we discussed. We have a business to. When the room was cleared, Philip continued to stare at me with a mix of astonishment and doubt. I didn't realize you had this quality in you. And I didn't acknowledge it. But your father, Reagan, showed up with a grim smile and fresh coffee. Don't rush into the celebrations just yet. The challenges are only beginning. It won't be simple to operate this business. But I'm glad I had a great teacher, I said, resting back in my chair. 3 weeks after the boardroom showdown, I finally started working and found out how deeply corrupt Reagan was. He stormed into my office, interrupting my normally peaceful morning coffee. Someone has been using the mainframe, he continued, shattering my demeanor and placing a pile of printouts on my desk. I read the first page about how we altered all the security procedures inside Reagan's office as they were deleting records despite having a sad expression. Someone was still working using Samra's old credentials after the system update. Harold appeared uneasy when someone knocked on the door. "Mrs. Martin, the whole development team in R&D is threatening to quit. So why has their funding been?" I shifted uneasily as the paperwork arrived this morning. "Seemingly signed by you." And I hurried out of my chair. "I never signed anything like that." And Reagan added 3 more things. "Someone informed one of our largest clients that we were going for bankruptcy over the phone this morning." My phone buzzed, and I received a text. Philip switched on the financial news. So I reached for the remote control and turned on the wall-mounted TV. The title caught my attention amidst a leadership crisis. "Grant Industries stock falls precipitously," Reagan murmured. "They're trying to destabilize the company from multiple angles." And I grabbed the opportunity. "Leon, please pull up my phone and bring all of the documents pertaining to the system permissions from the previous 5 years in an hour." Leon transformed my office into a war room, scattering papers around the conference table while Reagan worked. Leon indicated a signature here when tracking the system intrusions. 3 days prior to Harlan's passing, an authorization was issued granting a list of executives permanent system access, including. I scowled and asked how Samra and Noel were doing. But they were under house arrest. Philip was not working alone when he entered the room. And my mother called me to let me know that this is simply the. I banged my palm against the table to start. And now it's been 20 minutes later. Marcus, a nervous-looking man, sat across from me. "Since the system has hard-coded permissions, we are unable to overcome them and carry out my request without shutting down everything for at least 48 hours. Yet the trading platforms." I turned to Reagan and asked him how the manufacturing systems would cost us less than whatever they were designing next. He gave me a medication. "But there's something else you need to do. Can we expeditiously put emergency procedures in place already? Must understand that these removals aren't arbitrary, rather. They're directed at particular projects that are all related to a development venture Harlan launched last year." And while looking over the data, I came across Project Phoenix, which I had never heard of before. Leon clarified that it was about the groundbreaking clean energy technology from Harlan's pet project when my phone buzzed again with an unfamiliar number. My heart ceased its search for Project Phoenix. "Summerhouse is safe, so you'd better hurry, Reagan." I got up and invited Philip to stay with me. Leon began phoning our large stockholders to arrange the system shutdown and advised them to hang on to their shares despite it. The 20-minute trip to the summer residence felt like a lifetime. "Reagan, this must be a trap." However, the house was too quiet. And the safe was hidden. "And we need those files." As I entered the combination, my hands trembled behind a painting in the study that resembled the one in the main house. 1 USB disk and an additional note confirming that H. Harron's insurance coverage was activated. We both froze at the sound coming from downstairs. And Reagan breathed because he knew this would happen, muttered. And as voices reverberated around the house, we crept out when I connected the USB disk to my laptop. I gasped at the screen. Dozens of tapes showing discussions between Samra and other executives talking about topics other than Reagan stated that embezzlement, industrial espionage, insider trading, and even blackmail are not only financial issues. Silently. This has to do with power. They have been operating a covert business for years. My phone buzzed once another message has come in. And you now know what to do about it. My mind was racing when I started the car. So I called Philip and told him to get the board again for an emergency session. How are you as they prepare to play? I gripped the driving wheel while contemplating Harlan's chest movements. The USB drive felt hefty. So let's demonstrate how it's actually done. I knew one thing for sure as we sped back toward the city, whatever occurred next. This was he was typing when Philip looked at me across the kitchen table at a family supper that night. War. You can't be serious. Out invitations on my phone, believe me. It's flawless, it's crazy. He retorted. Reagan, you want to have a dinner party even though your mother and Noel are under house arrest and the business is in disarray. Interrupted from his position by the window. It's a bright, neutral area with witnesses. And they'll never. I was expecting my phone to ping with a response from Sam about how considerate we would be. They are happy that their attorneys have granted a temporary release for a family get-together. Reagan grinned when I gave Philip the message. They're coming, of course. Sadly. They believe they will have the advantage in our dining room the following evening. The exit looked like a stage set for a play's final act. So I had hired professional security to monitor it closely. Sam was secretly recording everything while Leon sat in the corner, feigning to work on his laptop despite her ankle monitor. She looked flawless when she initially came. And she gave her sweetie an air kiss. My cheeks. How courageous of you to host in light of what Noel wore. Hardly hiding her own surveillance gadget. This house is so charming, please sit down. I pointed to the wine table. You seem at ease, Noel said as she sat down. Thinking that your business is failing. I poured the wine, carefully. Isn't it odd that our stock has stabilized since Sam's smile briefly appeared this morning? How are those ankle bracelets treating you? You smug little one. I sat at the head of the table. Much like your house arrest. Sam caressed her arm. And, trying to be polite, Samara purred once Noel began speaking of family. I hit a button on my phone, causing the TV in the dining room to flicker to life. Let's watch a few home videos. And when the first one showed Sam talking about insider trading in her office, their faces went white. Noel sought to know why things improved with a board member who had now vanished to South America. The footage changed to a different one, showing Noel meeting with rivals to provide confidential information. Harrison responded. Oh, you're bluffing. Sam's voice trembled a little. I put a folder on the table since the SEC doesn't believe that these films are very. Philip, who had stayed quiet about Project Phoenix up until now, leaned. What is Project Phoenix? Mother, why was it so crucial that you tried to destroy the business in order to keep it clean? Reagan responded to the opportunity with energy that, if successful, may render fossil fuels obsolete, worth billions of dollars. Noel's voice was low in those movies. But today it's hazardous. You'll ruin everything. The corporation will never get over the scandal unless I drink some alcohol. Hold an alternative family gathering where you tell me everything, I mean everything, about Project Phoenix, your other activities in return for these private movies. Sam chuckled. However, it was hollow. You're extorting us. I'd rather consider it a negotiation. Took out a second folder and signed these whole confessions and collaboration forms, in exchange. The videos are never seen again. And if we reject Noel's challenge. I hit another button, and a new video with Samra talking about when I saw someone off screen taking Harold's prescription. I said, I'm protecting you. Everything came out quietly. And the only sound in the room was the incriminating argument on TV. You wouldn't believe how stunned Philip was as he listened to his mother talk about his father's passing. I slid the papers closer to the sign as Samra murmured that it would ruin Philip as well. Her palm trembled when Noel took the pen first. You're just like him. You know, I learned a lot from Harlan, who was usually 3 steps ahead. And I observed as Samra reached for the second pen at last. In addition, Phoenix will launch a project next week under my son's head. Broke up in the summer house safe. And you discovered the blueprints under close supervision. I gathered the signed confessions and dinners over the offices, along with everything else we required after leading him out. Philip turned to me and assured me, I'll take you home to truly understand Project Phoenix better. I took out the USB disk and discovered evidence. Reagan hummed softly. It's already working. Your father had a prototype. And it's been running the summer house for months. They wanted to bury it, which is why they were so frantic to stop you. I nodded. Maintain the existing revenue stream. But Harren had different ideas, therefore. Philip now inquired in a quiet voice as I read the signed confessions. I imagined that everything was finally coming together and that we could now create the surveillance footage of Samara and Noel driving away demonstrated your father's desire for something new and better as the sun began to set. They had reached their zenith and faced defeat. Now was the time to reshape their fate. Mine. And the future of the company through Project Phoenix. A transformation worthy of Harlan's aspirations. They scheduled a news conference for 2 p.m. however. Things took a drastic turn around 1:30. Marcus burst into my office. His face was pale. Someone broke the prototype last night. While I was reaching for my phone in the Summerhouse lab. Sam's house arrest officer. Mrs. We have a problem. Martin Ma. Someone has tampered with your mother-in-law's monitor, causing her to disappear completely. I turned on the TV just in time to view our stock price after she left a message. Mom. Telling me to monitor the stock market falling. Breaking news ticker. Unidentified sources have released charges of business espionage against the CEO of the Grant Industry damaging materials. Leaking all of Reagan's remarks from the doorway however. They changed the records to make it appear that Harlan and you were the ones who stole. Technologically. My phone buzzed once more. Noel, did you truly believe the press presentation should be entertaining? But ankle monitors could stop us. Where is Philip? I demanded it right here. My spouse. Grim's mother just called to tell me that they would be attending the press conference with evidence that you killed your father. Reagan swiftly clarified that they had altered his medical records to make it appear as though you were the one messing with his. I slapped my fist down on the desk. Took my prescription. And said, get Leon up here now and call Harold. Want the whole board to be on an emergency video conference in 5 minutes. The next 20 minutes were a flurry of arguments among board members, lawyers frantically going through documents over video chat and PR teams attempting to manipulate the press's narrative after Leon reminded me we wouldn't cancel. I got up and said we were moving. The conference begins in 30 minutes. Call everyone and relocate it to the estate's main auditorium. Philip appeared perplexed. Why? Because Harlan stored his actual insurance policy there. I went to Reagan's study safe. But it was empty. What if Samra removed something on the day of the will reading? If it wasn't empty, Reagan would have enlarged the original confession tapes. And I'm sure I know where she kept them. I took my keys. Philip accompanies me. Reagan stalls the press. Leon brings me back up at the police station. The drive to the estate was stressful. And as we arrived, we noticed another. We found them in Harlan's. Philip murmured. Car Samus are already here. In their feverish hunt. Sam and Noel were tearing the place apart in search of these. I displayed a collection of movies that I had taken from a secret section behind the safe that Harlan had. How did you spin around? Samara, Harlan told me all his details months ago. The safe was a ruse. And he knew you would look at the hiding places. So I grinned grimly. Noel scoffed. It doesn't matter what day the reading is. We have enough proof that Philip came forward to demolish your fabricated proof. Did you truly believe that? Dad wouldn't shield her from this because he was sick of Samara's spat. Bewildered. You tricked him. In fact, a new voice joined us. And we all turned to see Reagan was in the hallway with a tablet that Harlan had used to record everything. Including your discussions about killing him when the play button was clicked. Sam's voice filled the room. The medicine switch isn't functioning. Quickly Philip staggered back. But we need him gone before he can alter his will. Mother said icily that he was going to destroy everything we had built because it was business. No. I told her that he would reveal everything you stole. Cops. Reagan murmured softly. It's over. As sirens screamed in the distance. The board has already seen the actual documents. And the press is en route here rather than downtown. Your little plot is complete. Noel's voice shook. And I showed another video. But you can't prove anything. The prototype on the security film from last night that shows them breaking into the Summerhouse is a fake. By the way. One is securely locked up. And as Harlan's chest moves, the police, accompanied by federal officers, burst in. Noel, an agent, and Samara stepped forward, accusing you of conspiracy, corporate fraud, and homicide. Sam glanced at me one final time as they were led away in handcuffs. I responded, you think you've won, but you'll never be one of us. I really want to be the person Harlan saw in me, someone who could put things right. The press showed up immediately as I approached the podium with Philip at my side. Prepared to reveal the truth. The police cars withdrew and the cameras flashed. Philip gripped my hand as I considered Harran of Project Phoenix and the future of Grant Industry Mysteries. All of his meticulous preparation and the trust he had put in me were ready behind as the sun shone through the study windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Seemed like both a beginning and an end since the truth was finally being revealed. And with it came the opportunity to construct. The autumn wind whipped around the graveyard as I laid fresh flowers. creating something new from the ashes of the old at Harlan's grave. I folded the morning paper beneath my arm. The headline proclaiming Samra and Noel's guilt Phoenix is transforming everything. And I wish you could see it. I whispered to the headstone. Reagan came up behind you, crunching on fallen leaves and the board. Knowing that you had planned it, meetings will begin shortly. And today they will vote on the expansion. I used my finger to trace Harlan's name. Did you bring it? Among his personal belongings, I noticed a sealed packet marked for today's date. My hands were shaking when I opened it. And there was just one picture of myself. And on the back of his paper from one of our first lessons. Harlan wrote, "The future isn't about where you are." Martin's voice called from Little Bird and spoke on the topic of where you decide to travel. The boardroom felt different now that the cemetery entrance was ready for you. Harold smiled as I entered, signaling a shift from suffocating strain to an eager energy. Phoenix has surpassed all expectations with the most recent profit estimates on the screen project. And he declared the clean our market worth has tripled as a result of the energy project. And the foundation I requested taking. Leon informed me that my seat was entirely reorganized and that the new philanthropic initiatives include squeezing my hand beneath the table. Philip said, "I'm helping people now, not hiding offshore accounts. We'd whether there is something more about Reagan." And he faced the reality about his family, which strengthened our marriage when the FBI's investigation into Harlan's death was complete. They discovered evidence that Sam had been preparing. The room was quiet for more than a year. And before I was seated, Harold's old I picked up the queen piece from the chess set that I had relocated to the boardroom after taking over. Recalling how Leon informed me that the press is waiting outside and that they want a response regarding let them wait for the decisions. I said, standing to speak to the board, we need to talk about something more crucial. He left one final project proposal, which he named Legacy. I distributed the folders I had created. It's a comprehensive business reorganization that includes sustainable profit sharing for employees, follows moral investing principles and all the other things he desired for the future but was unable to put into reality while battling the. Harold carefully checked his glasses, reading for corruption. This would change. I grinned at the exact way we work. There are no more old money games. The old guard will not approve of family dynasty politics if it is just a good company founded on integrity and innovation. Reagan issued a warning. But he was also grinning. Philip reminded him that the old guard was incarcerated. The board members unanimously decided that something fresh was needed. And they filed. I sensed Harlan's presence in the room as they each stopped to shake my hand. He had anticipated this moment and had me ready. In innumerable little ways in preparation for the press. Lion inquired while holding the door. I gathered my papers and made a stop at Harlan's old chair, which offered a panoramic view of the entire city beyond the windows. We could influence all those lives and do all the good we could. Actually, I suggested that we have the press conference at the Summerhouse Lab and demonstrate Project Phoenix to them. Look out into the future. As the autumn sun peeked through the clouds, my phone rang with a message from the prison, sending long shadows across the city. After reading mine, Philip inquired, "Are you going to go?" Because Warden Samra wanted to meet. I removed the post without replying. But certain chapters must remain. We rode down in the closed Reagan, our coats in hand, the cars ready, and the press already gathered at the lab. In the elevator, I recalled how Samra had gazed down on me during our first drive together and never imagined that I would end up here. I still have the letter Harlan left me that day in my desk drawer. It reads, "Trust yourself, little bird. What are you thinking about, Philip? The nest was never large enough for your wings." I held his hand, facing the glass doors where the cameras were waiting, and said, "I'm thinking you're in addition to what we've accomplished. Our father would be pleased with our future and changes." The doors opened to camera flashes. And I grinned at the world. One project at a time, yelled inquiries. But this time I wasn't the stranger attempting to blend in. Instead, I was precisely where I was supposed to be, continuing a legacy based on the straightforward principles of Harlan. He had always believed that doing good was good business. And now at last, so did